the winner of the 2021 International Booker Prize.
The winner of the 2022 International Booker Prize.
The winner of the International Booker Prize.
The winner of the International Booker Prize 2024.
We won't actually know the winner of this year's prize for a few months yet, but the longlist is just around the corner, and longlists, well, they demand predictions, so I am very excited to be sharing my first prize predictions video of the year. Will I be reading the entire International Booker longlist? Well, to be honest, I doubt it. It's not an intention of mine that I'm looking to complete in 2025, but I am still a sucker for a prize list. So depending on how good it looks when it's announced, maybe I'll read a few. There are actually a couple of books which, if they are nominated, I do plan to read. But let's not get ahead of ourselves because those are part of my predictions. The longlist is coming quite early this year. Last year it was revealed like mid-March almost, but this year we are getting it before the end of February. So let me fill you in on all of the dates that you need to be aware of. So on the 25th of February, the longlist will be announced. Then on the 8th of April, it'll be whittled down to a short list of 6 books. And on the 20th of May, we'll find out who's won. Personally, I think this is great because it is almost the exact same timeframes as last year, except the longlist announcement is almost 2 weeks, 1.5, 2 weeks earlier. That means you've got extra time to explore the longlist before it is reduced down to those shortlistees. I find that a way more fun way to engage with a prize, and I would love for the Women's Prize to take a few notes on that because their timeframes for this year's fiction prize are, to be honest, pretty ridiculous. If you are unfamiliar with the International Booker, let's do a quick 101 on the prize and its rules. So this prize is an annual award which they aim to give to the finest single work of fiction from around the world that has been translated into English and published in the UK or Ireland. The longlist is made up of 12 or 13 books, but in practice it's almost always 13. And being longlist is brilliant for these authors and translators because it puts a spotlight on books that inevitably leads to greater awareness and greater sales and library acquisitions and all of that good stuff. It's also brilliant for publishers because this prize really brings attention to small and indie presses, more so I think than any other prize that isn't specifically about small and indie presses. Of course, being longlisted is great, but winning is even better, and it's pretty lucrative for both author and translator who take an equal share of a £50,000 prize, which right now I think is equivalent to around 62,000 US dollars. To be nominated, there are some eligibility rules that need to be met. So first, the book must be an English translation that has been released in the UK or Ireland between the 1st of May 2024 and the 30th of April 2025. That does mean that some books may be nominated which haven't been released yet and may still not have been released by the time the shortlist is announced. I know that can be really annoying for some readers, but it is just how things work right now. The author and translator both must be living at the time the book is submitted and throughout the entire process. So that means that if you are longlisted, say, and then there is some really horrible thing that happens and one of the author or translator pass away, it does mean that technically they are not eligible to continue into the shortlist or to win the prize. There are also some rules about the publisher being formally established in the UK or Ireland, which can make eligibility sometimes a little bit murky, a little bit unclear, especially to someone on the outside of that world like me. And there are some other related rules guarding against vanity publishing and self-publishing, which I expect mainly acts like a filter to make sure the judge's job is manageable. I'm sure they are reading tons of books as it is, and I imagine opening the floodgates would probably make that job far too overwhelming. Last year, I'm sure there were some rules about it needing to be a first-time translation, but I couldn't find that bit of the rules this year, so I guess it's possible that a new translation of an old work could technically be nominated, but maybe I have misread that. Finally, there has been one interesting change to the rules this year. So this year, the Booker has imposed a limit on the number of entries per publisher. For the English language Booker, there's long been this complicated thing about having a certain number of books you can submit based on your past performance, but the International Booker has never had that. And so this year they have imposed quite a simple 6-book limit per publisher or imprint of a publishing house. For most publishers, I assume this is just not going to be a problem, but for indie presses like Fitzcarraldo or Charco Press, who may publish more than 6 translations a year, it might mean some hard choices about which books they submit and which books they do not. So once the books have been submitted, you may be wondering, who are these people reading and judging all of the books? So let me give you a quick rundown of this year's judging lineup, because I think it's actually really great. The chair of judges this year is Max Porter. He's a poet and a novelist and formerly an editor, which is relevant for reasons I will go into in a bit once I get into my predictions. Caleb Femi is a Nigerian-British director and photographer, but most relevantly for this prize, he is an award-winning poet. And I think he's just published his second collection, which is getting a lot of love from readers from what I'm seeing on social media. Sana Goyal is an editor of a literary magazine called Wasafiri, and she's previously been a publicity manager at Tilted Axis Press, which is a small press that does a lot of great work to publish global majority authors, often in translation. She has also been a judge for a couple of prizes recently. So in 2022, she judged the Orwell Prize for Political Fiction, which was won by Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. But it had some offbeat titles in the mix, like Natasha Brown's Assembly and Isabel Weidner's Sterling Carat Gold. She's also judged the Republic of Consciousness Prize. The Booker website says this was in 2023, but it was actually in 2024, which is the year that Of Cattle and Men won, and both Olga Ravin and Shayla Smanioto were nominated. You've got to wonder whether this is going to say anything about what type of books might be on the list. Maybe it will. It seems like there's an appetite for zany stuff or like brutally sparse work, but we don't know how much sway Goyal had on those judging panels, so it could end up meaning nothing. Our next judge is Anton Her. He is someone who's probably very familiar to this corner of BookTube because he's everyone's favourite Korean translator. He has been nominated for this prize as a translator before, twice in fact, and both nominations were in the same year. I can only offer sympathy to any authors whose work he has translated and it's been published during the eligibility period, because I assume that as a judge, he can't be nominated himself. Finally, rounding out the judging panel is singer-songwriter Beth Orton, who has been nominated for the Mercury Prize multiple times, so she's a very accomplished musician. What will all this mean for the list? Well, I think we might be in for some titles that are quite playful and experimental, books that are poetic and perhaps a little bit weird. Let's now then get into the meat of this video, which is the predictions. You might have seen a predictions video from me before, but if you have not, I'm just going to run through the 13 books, give you a really high-level view of what they're about and why I think they might be nominated. I also like to group things into categories, just because it's a little bit of fun, like once I've drafted my list, to see what connects them thematically or like the reason they might be nominated. And our first category is called Returning Champs. These are authors that have won the International Booker Prize before. I do have 3 books in this category, and do I think that there are going to be 3 former winners making an appearance? To be honest, probably not, but I'm hedging my bets a little bit that at least 1, perhaps 2 of them will make it. The first returning champ, I think, is as close as you can get to a locked-on nomination, and that is We Do Not Part by Han Kang. This was translated from Korean by Lee Ye-won and Paige Anaya Morris, and Han Kang, I guess, has most recently been everywhere because she won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2024, but she also won the International Booker in 2016 for her novel The Vegetarian. This is her first newly published novel in English since the Nobel Prize win, and it's about a woman who sets out to fulfill a request from her sick friend, and in doing so has to confront some things from her past. Interestingly, I think one of the things that gives this book a real edge is, as I mentioned before, Max Porter used to be an editor, and one of the books he edited was Han Kang's first novel to be translated into English, which was The Vegetarian. She had already been translated into some other languages at that point, but Max Porter was instrumental in raising her profile among English language readers. And he is also quoted on the back of this new one. So he describes the book as a gift to us all. And what better gift than to pass it on to followers of the International Booker Prize? Our next former winner is Olga Tokarczyk with her book The Impusium, translated from Polish by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. Like Han Kang, Tokarczyk is a Nobel Prize winner. Tokarczyk previously won for her novel Flights in 2018, and this is her latest novel, once again published in the UK by Fitzcarraldo. It's a creative retreading of Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, taking place in the early 1910s at a Polish health resort, where gentlemen can go to convalesce for tuberculosis. Against the backdrop of the conversations these men have, debating the big issues of the day, there's some strange stuff going on, and they feel a bit like they're being watched. To top it off, I think this book has perhaps the best subtitle you're ever likely to encounter, because it's called The Impusium, a health resort horror story. Isn't that just perfect? Rounding out the former winners is Our City That Year by Geetanjali Shree, translated from Hindi by Daisy Rockwell. Shree is the most recent of the former winners I have included here because she won in 2022 for her novel Tomb of Sand. Her new book is not quite as long as the chunkster that was Tomb of Sand because it comes in at just over 430 pages, but it does sound pretty great. It takes place in an unnamed Indian city and follows 3 academics dealing with rising tensions and violence between Hindus and Muslims. This one isn't out until the 22nd of April, so it will be tough to get your hands on it if it is nominated. But hey, good things come to those who wait. Our next category is called Books to Send Porter Potty. And I've been very led by just wanting to say porta potty in this video, but these are books that I think are fine-tuned to appeal to the tastes of Max Porter, and I think in reading them they'll send him potty and he will not be able to help but to put them on the list. I hope you agree with my assessment, but I do concede that this set of books might only be here to enable this category title. First up in this category we have Boy with a Black Rooster by Stephanie Vosschulte, translated from German by Alexandra Roche. This is one that I have read and I think this just has some big Max Porter energy. It's about this young boy called Martin who essentially goes on this episodic adventure across a world that feels quite medieval but also feels a little post-apocalyptic. He's quite an unusual boy and he's very perceptive in this way that really unsettles people around him. And over the course of the book, we learn about his difficult backstory and why he might be the way that he is. Oh, and he also has this black rooster that he sometimes hides in his shirt and it sometimes talks to him. Maybe I'm being swayed too much by the fact that this and Grief is the Thing with Feathers both share talking black birds, but I haven't got much else to go on, so I'm just going to go with it. Next we have a book that sounds utterly wild. It is Dengue Boy by Michelle Nieva, translated from Spanish by Rahul Berry. This one takes place in the 23rd century and its main character is Dengue Boy. He is a humanoid mosquito whose appearance everyone is repulsed by, including his own mum. In this novel, the world seems on course to come to its end. Most places are submerged or uninhabitable, and humans continue to waste resources because it's what we do. But amidst all of that, Dengue Boy searches for meaning in his life and to find out where he came from. I really, really want to read this one because it sounds pretty brilliant. Finally, in this category, we have The Book of Disappearance by Ibtissim Azem, translated from Arabic by Sinan Antoun. This is from a Palestinian author and imagines all Palestinians just disappearing one day. And it follows this liberal Zionist character who doesn't agree with the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank, but he is committed to the project of Israel. And this character sets out to find out what happened, and I expect is confronted by some difficult questions and some difficult truths in answer to those questions. Max Porter has spoken out about the atrocities in Gaza and has actually recently visited, so I would not be surprised to see a Palestinian author on the list, because it just feels important and timely to hear this story, and doing it in an inventive way feels super in keeping with the tastes of some of the judges, including Max Porter, but also Anton Her. I am a little bit uncertain about the eligibility of this one actually, because it was originally published in the US in 2019, and I'm sure there was a rule about like if it was published outside of the UK and Ireland, it has to be within like the last 2 years or something, but I couldn't find that specific rule in this year's eligibility criteria, so maybe it doesn't apply. If that rule is in place and this one isn't eligible, then I would probably substitute in here another book by a Palestinian author or something addressing the Palestinian plight, because I just think that theme is very likely to come through given our judges. Our next category is called Outsiders, and this is because it's about stories of people who are on the outside of mainstream life, either because they have been pushed there or because it's by choice. The first book I've got in this category is called Hunchback by Sao Ichikawa, translated from Japanese by Polly Barton. Hunchback is about a woman with a congenital disorder that affects her spine, and from her residential care, she lives her entire life online, which includes posting saucy stories on an erotica website. It turns out that one of the carers has read the stuff that she has posted, and rather than feel ashamed about it, she makes a proposal. This book has already won prizes in Japan, and it's written by a disabled author, so it would be really great to see some own voices representation on the list this year. Next we have the book Colony by Annika Norlin, translated by Alice E. Olsen. This is a Swedish book and it was a bestseller in Sweden. It's about a burnt out woman taking a few days out of her busy life to visit the countryside. And it's all very peaceful out there, but she comes across this group of 7 people living in a commune who are all outsiders in their own way. The woman hears their stories and how they ended up where they are, and she finds herself very intrigued by their alternative lifestyle, but she can't help but stir things up a bit. It sounds like this might be a lighter, perhaps slightly more commercial read, and I don't wonder if this could be a good counterbalance against some of the heavier books that will be on the list. I'm saying on the list like my list is going to be the list, but I think in any list there is likely to be a mixture of lightness and darkness, and this could be on the lighter side. Next we have a book called On the Greenwich Line by Shadi Lewis, translated by Catherine Halls. This, interestingly, was originally written in Arabic, but it is set in London, and it's about a housing officer trying to work out what a new policy announcement means for him and all of the migrants that he works with on a day-to-day basis. And then he becomes somehow responsible for arranging the funeral of a Syrian refugee. It feels like it hits on some really important political questions here in the UK right now, about migration, about housing, about how much the government supports people, and it just sounds like a very timely pick for the long list. And my final pick in this category is What I Know About You by Eric Shakur, translated from French by Pablo Strauss. This is another one that I have already read, and it was one of my favourite reads of last year. I absolutely loved it. It's about this doctor in Egypt who has married his childhood sweetheart, and he's living this very contented life. He's quite noble. He provides free healthcare to people in a poor area in addition to his usual practice. And then his life is turned upside down when he meets this young man who awakens something in him that he hasn't really recognised or reacted to before. It has so much drama, but it is so beautifully written, so whether it is nominated or not, I would highly recommend reading it. My final category is called Big Brain Energy, because I think the International Booker is, in particular, maybe like more than the English language Booker, it's a space where these intellectually challenging or really interesting experimental novels can get a bit of airtime. And so I've got 3 books here that, from the outside at least, because I haven't read them, but they seem to be doing something a bit interesting and a bit different. The first of these is The Son of Man by Jean-Baptiste Delamo, translated from, I think, French by Frank Wynne. This is about a man who returns home to a woman and child after being away for many years, and he takes them off into the mountains to try and rekindle their family unit. But things do not go to plan because he descends into some kind of madness that echoes his own relationship with his father, who was quite ruthless. And eventually, the son has to build up the courage to stand up to his father. It feels like this is a book that's going to be really tense and claustrophobic, a slow burn read, and I think it could be a very good addition to the long list. Next, we've got another one that was originally written in French, which is The Silence of the Choir by Mohamed Mbougassar, translated by Alison Anderson. I included Mohamed Mbougassar in my predictions list last year for The Most Secret Memory of Men, but it did not come to pass then, so I thought I'd give it another go this year. This is another book that deals with immigration and, in particular, the small boats crisis in Europe, following a number of men who arrive in a small town in Sicily to seek asylum. It depicts their many encounters with the locals, and it gives us lots of different perspectives and voices. It's supposed to be quite bold and experimental, and it pushes the form of the novel to its limits. I think Mohamed Mbougassar is building up a really good reputation among literary fiction readers, so I would not be surprised to see him on the list. My final pick in this category, and indeed my final guess at the long list this year, is Solenoid by Mircea Cartarescu, translated from Romanian by Sean Cotter. I did not know until recently what a solenoid was, but the one in my coffee machine broke, or potentially broke. We think we might have done something to fix it for now, but we'll see. It is basically this small metal coil, and when you run electricity through it, it acts as a magnet. I have no idea what that has to do with this book, because I do not really know what this book is about. I know it's following a teacher who used to be an aspiring author, and I've heard it's big and sprawling and challenging and this absurdist story, but beyond that, I'm not really sure what it is. For some reason though, I feel like if it is nominated, I am just going to commit myself to reading it without finding out any more. It doesn't feel like my usual kind of book, but I'm just going to do it. And it might kill me. Well, not kill me, but like kill my appetite for reading. I just feel like giving it a go though. The other thing it really has going for it is that it has already won the Dublin International Literary Award last year in 2024, and one of the judges was Anton Her. So assuming this book is eligible and it is submitted, I just can't imagine it not making the list. Can't imagine it not. Yeah, okay, I was checking my double negatives there, but I think that makes sense. I think it's going to be on the list. That wraps up my predictions for this year's International Booker Prize. I would love to hear which books of my predictions you have read and what you thought of them, because there's plenty here that I haven't read myself. I'm just going off a hunch. And I'd also like to hear which books you would really like to see on the list, or which books you think will be on the list. Do drop a comment down below and we can have a good natter about it. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit like, because it really helps the channel out. And if you are here for the first time and you want to see more from me, then why not hit subscribe? I will have some more predictions coming soon, because the Women's Prize for Fiction is fast approaching and I'm very excited for that one too. But until next time, toodles.